everyone, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I have my February wrap-up. So in the month of February, I did read 11 books, including one DNF, and a total of 2,734 pages. We are going to go over my stats first before we jump into the books, and so for the genre of books that I read 8 fantasy titles, 1 romance, 1 contemporary, and 1 paranormal. Now, I did end up participating in the Fantasy Romance February, and so some of these books are technically fantasy romance, but I do not separate those into a different category because it is technically a subcategory. So what I did is just sort of classified it based on if it was more fantasy or more romance, and as you can tell, more of these books were fantasy than romance. I read 7 novels, 3 graphic novels, and 1 manga. Now, I don't always go into the stat of like how many books were indie versus traditionally published. However, because I was doing Fantasy Romance February, I do feel like a lot of the books that I read this month were indie published, so I was very curious about that stat, and I actually read 7 indie books or self-published books versus 4 traditionally published. For the age groupings, I did read 2 young adult, 2 new adult, and 7 adult titles. How I got the books, I did end up reading 1 ARC, 1 book from Kindle Unlimited, 1 book that I had bought this year, so far in January or February, 2 books that were gifted to me by somebody else, and 6 books from my own TBR. And then for the format of the book, I did read 4 ebooks and 7 physical books. I think that's all the stats except for the star ratings. So for the star ratings, I did have 1 DNF, 1 3.5 star, 3 4 stars, 1 4.5 star, and 5 5-star reads. So overall, not a bad month. We are now going to actually get into the books and the ratings, and I'm going to be going from my DNF, or my lowest rated book, to the highest and favorite book of the month. So my lowest rated book, or technically the book that I DNF'd this month, was The Zodiac Academy, The Awakening, which is the first book in the series by Carolyn Peckham and Suzanne Valenti. So this is a book that I was semi-curious about. I never really had it on my want to read list. I did end up getting this from Kindle Unlimited, so it just came with my normal subscription for it. I didn't pay anything extra to read this, and I ended up DNFing it on the last day of February. I actually started this very early in the month because I saw that A Book Box was going to be doing gorgeous, gorgeous editions of these books, and I'm one of those people that loves gorgeous covers of books, and so I was curious more because of that cover. What is this actually about? I had heard about it before, it was sort of on my radar, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I ended up not finishing it before I did a vlog this month in February, and then I just never picked it back up, and I do think I just sort of ended up being very apathetic toward it, and it brought my reading down near the end of February. But basically this follows a pair of twin sisters who I think I classified this one as a new adult book because they are, I think, at least 18, graduated high school already by the time the book starts. They are orphans, and they find out that they're actually part of this fae type of society instead of human. There are magical powers based on the 4 elements, and it sounded very intriguing. It's supposed to be like a college setting. It felt very much more high school than college. There are some bullying aspects. It's supposed to have romance eventually, but again, I just sort of got very apathetic towards it. It's not necessarily a bad book, but I just didn't want to pick it up once I had put it down, and it took me forever to actually decide, hey, I'm never gonna finish this. So that is why I ended up DNFing it. Moving to my 3.5 star, it is Gild by Raven Kennedy. So this is actually the book that you guys voted for in my poll for the February TBR. I do a TBR game every month now, and sometimes a poll pick will pop up and you guys have to vote for me. This is one that I actually did do a vlog for because I specifically read it for the Fantasy Romance February. I'll leave the vlog linked down below for you in case you're interested in more thoughts and stuff. And this is a 3.5. I'm very sort of conflicted on this one because I went in knowing that it was fantasy romance, King Midas retelling, and in this first book, there's no romance. I do feel like this is something that is going to pick up in the second book. That is not necessarily a bad thing, but I wasn't fully expecting that. Our main character of Oren is gilded gold. Like, she is property of King Midas. And one thing that I don't think I had heard anybody really talk about is in this first book, she is like in love with him, but it's like very Stockholm syndrome-y. It is because she knows her life could be worse. Even though she's trapped, she can't go anywhere. She is like property of this guy. I did like the last third or quarter of the book because it actually broadened up the world a lot, and it gave us new information that I think will be very interesting in the second and third book. I knew a lot of people liked this series, and I thought a lot of people liked this first book. However, during the vlog, I ended up going, I think, on Goodreads and realized that this first book is only like 3-ish stars for the average rating. It does appear that the second and third books are like over 4-star rated, so a lot of people seem to be maybe a little bit more hit or miss on this first one, and then the series gets better. I've actually heard that this first one is sort of a slog to get through, but the series does get better. I'm curious enough about the second book that I think I'm going to continue eventually, but because the first book wasn't better than a 3.5, it might take me a little while to get there. Let me know your thoughts on this one, just because it was something that I was a little bit going back and forth on through my entire read of it. Moving into my 4 stars, I have 3 of them. The first one is actually a reread. It's In the Air Tonight by Laurie Handeland. I gave it a 4 stars the first time I read it back in 2015, and this was one of Presley's picks. He actually picked the third book in this series, but I decided that I needed to reread the first one before I continue on in the series, and this is basically a paranormal romance type of thing with witches. Our main character here can actually see ghosts, which is one of my favorite sort of like witchy power things. Like, I just think that is so fun. It is in the air tonight because they do explain that that's sort of an air power. So again, we are based on elemental type of magic. And this is just a 4-star because there wasn't like anything that was like super compelling or super amazing to make it that 5 stars, but it is a very, very solid paranormal witchy romance based around sisters. So in this first book, we follow this first sister here, and each subsequent book is going to be more like a companion novel type of style with each other sister. They don't know they're related. They're basically orphans. It's this whole thing in this world, but it is very fun, very witchy, and it has some romance in there. My next 4 stars I actually also read in the Fantasy Romance February vlog. It's Whispers of Shadow and Flame by Elle Penelope. This is the second book in the Earthsinger Chronicles. The first book was actually Song of Blood and Stone that I read last Fantasy Romance February. Absolutely loved that one, gave it 5 stars. This one follows characters from Lagrimar. So in this world, Lagrimar and Elsira are the 2 different countries that are basically fighting this like never-ending war. So there is a magical mantle between the worlds to sort of separate them, and we know in this book and in the first one that the magical mantle is cracking and is basically going to fall down and cause this war between the 2 kingdoms. The first book is set in Elsira, which is basically white people without magic, and this is set in Lagrimar, which is basically black people with magic. There is very good commentary, especially in the first book, about racism and all that kind of stuff, and because we are set in Lagrimar, I think the entire cast of this book is black, and I absolutely loved the characters in here. The reason it's not a full 5 stars, though, is this book takes place a little bit before and during the first book in the series. So we're basically seeing one country in the first book and the second country in this book at around the same time. And the problem for me is that we didn't feel like we had a bigger plot, like a bigger overarching plot for this book. The first book is about trying to prevent the mantle breaking and like stop the like bad guy from this country who is like a tyrant and an evil ruler of these people coming over to the other country and like causing havoc. This one, while we do have those overtones in it, is more about the individualized stories of some of the characters in here, and so it just didn't feel like it had as much oomph, as much importance as the first book. And like the climax of this book, the ending of this book, is the characters just being told about the climax in the first book. So it was a little bit disappointing that way, but I absolutely love Elle Penelope's writing style and the characterization and like the different social commentaries that we have in these books. This is a 4-book series and I definitely want to continue with book 3 and book 4 eventually. I don't own them yet though, so we'll see when that happens, but still a very good addition to the series, just not quite as good as the first one. My last 4-star is another sequel. This is Soul of the Sword by Julie Kagawa. This is the sequel to Shadow of the Fox, which I read 2 years ago, I'm actually pretty sure, and I gave that one 5 out of 5 stars. So this is a series that is very much like, feels like an anime that you could be watching. Like, it's very moving from place to place, fighting different monsters. There are some action and stuff like that, but the character development is really, really good. I absolutely love the first book in the series, and this follows directly after that. I really thought I should have reread the first book in this series before I picked this one up. However, while I was lost at the very beginning, they did a good enough job wrapping everything up and like reviewing it for us from the first book to this one that after a little while at the beginning, I didn't feel like I needed to reread that first book anymore, which is great. But the reason this is a 4-star is that we have 3 different parts to the story, and the entire first part basically just feels like a setup for what is to come. Like, it was very much expositional again, and that first part, I don't know if it's only 1/3 of the book or not, but it felt like it took a while to get going, to actually get to the action and stuff. Now, again, I absolutely love the characters, and I really, really loved some of the character development aspects of the story. There was a lot of action and good things with like the demons and gods and stuff like that in here, especially because this does draw from Japanese mythology. Like, it was very, very interesting once we got past that beginning, slow building up part. And I did buddy read this with Lena from Sufficiently Advanced Lena. I loved the buddy reading aspect of it. Like, it was just so much fun, but it did not quite live up to the first book in the series. This is another series that I think is completed now, and I think it's only 3 books, so I do need to continue because I definitely need to know what happens after this book, but again, I don't own it yet, so we'll see when that happens. Moving to my 4.5 star, I have Fantasy of Frost by Kelly St. Clair. This is another one that I talked about in the Fantasy Romance February vlog, and I really, really enjoyed this one. This one looks very, very short, but the text in here is actually sort of small, so it does feel longer than it actually looks like page number wise. This was a gift from Lana from Lore and Lullabies because it is one of her like favorite fantasy romance series, that kind of stuff. I really, really enjoyed this. The only reason it is not a full 5 stars is because I think the second half of the book slowed down a little bit and I didn't feel like we had enough like overarching plot to move forward, but I really did love the characterization and like the setting of the world. So basically this follows a world where there's like 2 lands. One is an ice land, one is a fire land, and they're like circular lands. It's a very interesting setup that are connected by this like little bridge. I'm wondering, do they have a picture in here somewhere? I think they do because it's very interesting. They're connected by this bridge. So you see like ice land, fire land, and there's a connection in the middle. And the Fireland, the coolest part is the part where the bridge is connected, and in the Iceland, the warmest part is the part where the bridge is connected. And they rotate interesting ways, but basically we have these 2 different peoples from this area, and our main character that we follow is like the princess of the Fireland, and she ends up having this like sneaky relationship with one of the princes from the Iceland, and I can't really get into a whole bunch of it. The summary is not a very good summary for like what this is actually about, but I absolutely loved learning about the characters, learning about the lands. Our fire princess eventually does get to go over to the Iceland, and the one thing that is very intriguing about the whole thing is that she is forbidden from showing her face to anyone. She has to wear a veil constantly, and so there is this like mystery aspect to it as well, but I absolutely love the writing style. Again, the only reason it wasn't a full 5 stars is because I did think in the second half it got a little bit slow. Like, we started to talk about potentially some more plot going forward, but it was very much focused on just character development and like friendship development at that point, and so it was just something that I was wishing for slightly more. This is another one that I definitely want to continue, and I think I have downloaded the Kindle Unlimited copy of the second book because this is one that I do want to continue sooner rather than later. Moving into the 5 stars, the first 5-star I have here is Falling, Drowning Volume 1 by Yuko Inari. So this was actually the arc that I received for February. I think I actually got it only a few days before it was scheduled to be published, because this is published by Kodansha, and it is very common for them to upload their manga arcs pretty soon, like when the date is going to be, or actually right after as well. I absolutely love this one. This is a shoujo manga, and it definitely feels like the typical like high school falling in love, potential love triangle sort of thing. But our main female character has amnesia, and she might be connected to the new boy in school, but she doesn't know how. She doesn't even know that she could be connected, but like we're getting little pieces of that. And so the fact that we have the shoujo aspect, but also this sort of mystery amnesia aspect, I just absolutely loved it. The art style was gorgeous, and so this is definitely one that I need more in the series, and I'm definitely going to be looking out for. This was such a fun, quick read, and I just absolutely loved it. My next 3 5-star reads are the 3 volumes of For Goodness Sake by Kaylin Smith. So this is the entire series. We have Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. Volume 2 is the one that got picked for my TBR, and I had read Volume 1 previously, but I decided I needed to reread it and just continue, and I just absolutely love these. One of my favorite things about Kaylin Smith, 1, is her art is gorgeous, but 2, when she gets to author and illustrate her own comics, her characterization is like one of my favorite things. Like, I fall in love with her characters every single time. So these are all like almost 100 pages or just around 100 pages each for each volume, and I love this. It's basically about this guy named Thatcher who is cursed to look like a demon and have demonic characterizations, and then he meets Rain, who is basically a hippie in a school bus. She has a dog named Co-Pilot. Like, I love the characterization so much. This is one of those series that is very full of heart as well, so the further you get into the books, the more sort of emotional it gets, but it's still just so heartwarming. Like, I absolutely love this. I love the fact that Rain really wants to help Thatcher out and try and figure out why he looks demonic and stuff like that. Another favorite thing is this could have been a very like romance heavy type of series, and Kaylin Smith left it open to feel like it could be romance or it could be friendship. Like, you don't have to read into it one way or the other for sure. Like, I just absolutely love this, and again, I love her art style. It is gorgeous. This is so good. And then finally, my favorite book of the month is actually a short story. It is A Better Fate by D.N. Bryn. This is another one I talked about in the vlog that I mentioned before. This book is somewhere between 17 and 25 pages. I think Goodreads has 1 page count and Amazon has another page count. I don't actually know exactly how long it is, but it is a fantasy romance between a dryad and a zombie, and it was absolutely beautiful, especially for how short it is. I'm hit or miss with like short stories and even novellas sometimes, just because of how quick things can be, but this is one of those things that I absolutely loved. Like, I would watch this as a short movie. I would love to see these characters come back in some way in D.N. Bryn's work. I know it's not connected to any of their other like stories and books, but I absolutely just fell in love with the characters and the setting and the writing style. Like, this was the most poetic book that I read this month, but that's actually saying something as well, because I do not like purple prose, and it was not purple prose, but it was very beautifully written. It was just so good. Oh, I think I also forgot to mention, but I should, it's sapphic as well. Like, it was just so good. I need more of these characters. I also just need to read more of D.N. Bryn's work in general. I think they might be one of my favorite authors. It was so good. And then that technically is everything that I read in the month of February. So better than I thought I was going to do. I did not read one of the books on my TBR that I set for myself, but I did technically read 10, almost 11 whole things if we're counting my DNF, which I do usually count my DNF because I read almost 300 pages of that book. I just didn't finish it. And that is going to be it for today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos. I do have videos up Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I will see you then. Bye!